Halo is back, baby! Well, the first flight for Halo Infinite has come and gone, and after 6 years of waiting, we finally got our hands on it. And oh boy,
it's a bit special.
Now, just going by my channel, I would understand someone assuming that I'm not that big a fan of 343 and that I'm kind of a hater. And yes, I have poked fun at them for meme's sake, but behind the scenes, I've actually been more mixed towards 343. Yes, during the Halo 4 and 5 days, I wasn't really happy with the direction they've been taking the series. But ever since they started doing flights and fixing MCC, I've really learned to respect them for openly appreciating their community and listening to their feedback. Unlike some other companies that I know, I feel like their changed approach to Halo and its community have finally come together with this flight. And if this flight is anything to go by, this could honestly be one of the best Halo games, potentially ever. But let's be fair, this video will judge this as a flight. That means I'm really only gonna judge the core gameplay and not so much the smaller things like graphical detail or stability or content. This is a tech demo, not even qualified to be called a beta. The main purpose of this flight is to balance the gameplay and weapons, bring attention to technical issues and bugs, and give 343 feedback on what we think of the game so far. So let's not get our expectations too high at this point and just talk about what we thought of the flight itself. Starting with sound, the music that plays during the main menu and some of the match is so satisfying. This feels like a true callback to classic Halo music while also giving it a modern twist. I'd play some on its own to show you, but YouTube will crucify me if I do that. So the music playing during some of the background footage will have to do. I also love most of the sound effects for the weapons. Weapons like the BR and the sniper rifle sound so beefy and cool. They actually sound like they pack a punch, unlike the glorified Nerf guns we had with Halo 5's arsenal. I do feel like the needler sounds off and needs a bit of work, but other than that, the weapon sounds are on point. In fact, the only real complaint I have with the sound is in certain matches, the audio for many sound effects won't appear, and Halo Infinite kinda turns into Halo ASMR. Switching to graphics, they're just as satisfying. I do want to clarify though, I played a little bit on Xbox One and mainly on PC, but with medium graphics settings. Also, this is a tech demo, so don't look at this and expect this to look like the most next-gen looking thing you've ever seen right now. There are still missing details like bullets hitting the mud or walls, but I'm sure 343 will add those in before launch. Despite that, however, the game looks really nice and is actually not that bad looking on Xbox One as well. Besides for some muddy textures and a little more pop-in objects, the Xbox One version doesn't seem like that much of a downgrade if you don't want to put the money into a next-gen console or a gaming PC, which means I'm probably biting myself for that video essay I did. As for the actual graphics, everything looks nice and satisfying to the eye. It just feels so good to have the classic Halo art style back. Everything looks pretty realistic and still colorful and not muted in gray like many realistic looking games are today. Despite this being an early build, there is a lot of detail in the environments, the weapons, objects, and especially the Spartan's armor. Even the helmets and armor I wasn't crazy about wearing still look so good because unlike many of Halo 5's armors, they actually seem practical and yet simply shaped and designed. And the armor itself looks so realistic, I actually feel like I could touch it and put it on. It just looks so cool looking at your Spartan in the menu, and especially when he's with the rest of his fire team. I'm fanboying out. There are armors that are clearly seem to be reinventions of classic armors like ODST and Recon, but if past screenshots are anything to go by, then I expect we should see those classic versions of the armors as well. And with a Reach style customization coming back, I'm really excited to see what kind of armor combinations I can make in the future. I also really love how clean yet informative the Spartan's HUD is. It's gotta be one of my favorites in the series. Along with that, I also love how many medals there are, though honestly, I'm kinda disappointed about how they're presented. There are so many thoughtful and creative medals that you could earn, but they're all so small and similarly colored that I feel 343 really needs to redesign, or at least reposition or resize them so they feel more prominent and important. Maybe they can get rid of the "you killed blank" player that shows up above the medals or below your reticule. I mean, we already have a kill feed and hit markers, so I feel like you can have that little bit of extra information taken out and give the medals more room. That, or just have the medals be on the left side like some of the other Halo games. I don't know, I'm spitballing here for ideas. There are other aspects I could spend time talking about too, like the nice animations, the hilarious ragdoll physics, the Spartan and AI voices, the decent but also kinda clunky AI that I've actually seen some people improve on, or the cool but sometimes glitchy like intros and outros. But the last thing I want to talk about for graphics before I move on is all the actual visual indicators that play into actual gameplay. For example, I love the new weapon racks and how they actually tell you when they're gonna respawn. I can't tell you how many times I would have skipped a power weapon if I hadn't taken a double take and realized, oh look, the bulldog or the skewer are about to respawn. Another example is the Spartan's shields having hit indicators. This basically means that an area you hit on a Spartan will actually light up, which is very informative. Even the power-ups that you can carry instead of just automatically equipping upon picking up actually light up on you, so you can easily tell when someone has a power-up on them. Even the enemy outlines that replace the classic red versus blue seem to work just as well. I was a little skeptical about how easy it would be to tell people apart, but for the most part it works just as well as red versus blue, but you actually get to express yourself with your own customized Spartan. The only time I ever got a little confused by it was when my teammate had the same color and armor as the enemy bot or player. Also, I really like the idea of having all your teammates like outlined no matter where they are in the map. So not only do you know where they are, but what they might have or what they're doing. But at times when I was playing with my friends, it was hard to tell who was who and who was where. I don't know if there's a system where your fire team members are a different color from your regular teammates, but if there is, I think it needs a little work because sometimes I don't think it actually like came into effect and everyone just showed up as the same teammates. Maybe it would help if all your teammates had like clan tags or gamer tags above their head. That said though, overall I'm pretty happy with how all these little details really help to improve the gameplay. Speaking of gameplay, let's actually talk about the game itself. How does it play?
Keep it up. Double kill. Triple kill.
After waiting 6 years to play this game, how do I feel?
I'm a happy man!
This game is a lot of fun, and we mainly just versed bots in what's probably the least polished version of this game we'll ever get our hands on. I can't wait to see what the full game is gonna be like in its prime. It really does feel like the proper sequel to the Bungie games, and honestly bridges the gameplay gap between the Bungie's Halos and 343's. 343 has seriously scaled back on a lot of the gameplay mechanics, from Halo 5 and Halo 4 by cutting stuff like ground pound, thrusters, Spartan charge, and so on, and is instead focused more on building Infinite's sandbox, which is always the most important part of a Halo game. Now, that being said, this is not a carbon copy of Halo 3. There's definitely some mechanics from 343's games that have returned, such as sprint, clamber, and slide. However, these have been scaled back to the point where they don't ruin the gameplay and actually benefit it. Obviously, the biggest example is sprint. Sprint has been such a hot topic in the Halo community because despite its inclusion in multiple Halo games, it seems 343 and even Bungie with Halo Reach couldn't figure out how to make sprint work without conflicting with the rest of Halo's gameplay. From forcing maps, vehicles, and weapons to change in order to work with sprint, to letting players blast across maps and being easy to evade enemies, it seemed it could never work in Halo Sandbox. But in Infinite, I think 343 found a great balance here. Sprint lets you go faster as usual, but it's barely noticeable in Infinite, and not enough to feel like a get out of jail free card. The same can basically be said for sliding. But if you properly mix sprint and sliding together, then you can move a lot more quickly. This is something that's not easy to use and abuse, but if you can master it, it can give you a slight edge, but not enough that those who don't use it won't feel outclassed. Also, whether you're clambering, sliding, or sprinting, if you need to engage an enemy, you can now raise your weapon immediately without having to wait through a long animation when you break out of movement. Finally, because sprint has been slowed down, you can once again recharge your shields while sprinting, so you don't have to worry about balancing retreating to heal with making sure you don't sprint so you can actually use your shields like in Halo 5. It's just great to have these advanced movement options without having to deal with all the frustrations that came with them. So, congratulations 343, you made a Halo game where people aren't mad about sprint.
There are those who said this day would never come. What are they to say now?
There are other gameplay features that you might not use a lot as well, but these are some pretty nice additions. For starters, you can ping and mark areas and enemies for you and your teammates for communication purposes. You can also scan the area for stuff like available weapons either on the weapon racks or on the floor. You can even drop weapons without having to switch with another weapon if you want to just share a weapon with someone. Like maybe you picked up the hammer and someone really wanted it, so it's like, here, have the hammer. Though I did sometimes drop my weapon by accident despite not pressing the D-pad, so there might be a little glitch that you might need to investigate there. Another core gameplay feature that has returned is Bloom, but besides for maybe weapons like the Commando or the Sidekick, Bloom here is not as impactful or detrimental as it is in Reach, and actually makes combat a little more interesting. Again, like sprint, slide, and clamber, all the benefits, none of the frustrating drawbacks. Now, before I move on from Infinite's core gameplay and talk about its sandbox, I do want to talk about one big issue I did have with the core gameplay. You see, while I play on PC, I always play Halo with a controller because personally I feel that's how Halo's always meant to be played. However, I and many other people who use controller on PC noticed that there doesn't seem to be much, if any, aim assist. I noticed my aiming with weapons like the Sidekick, the Heat Wave, the Sniper, and the Commando were extremely inconsistent besides for maybe the Academy. And I just thought I was garbage with these weapons because my friends who played on Xbox, they weren't having any issues with them. In fact, some of my friends loved these weapons, whereas I was struggling with them. But then I started to hear other people who use controller on PC have similar issues. Especially when you're going up against keyboard and mouse players, aim assist is crucial for controllers because it allows us to stand a chance against them. So if there isn't aim assist for controllers on PC, That would probably be my biggest suggestion for 343 to fix first, because that was probably one of the only issues that actually hurt my experience during this flight. Alright, talking about the sandbox, I'm going to briefly touch on the weapons because we still have a lot to cover and we're already approaching that 20-minute mark. So overall, most of the weapons feel great. I love how many of the Covenant weapons implemented that venting style of reloading that the plasma repeater from Halo Reach had. I also love how weapons like the Heatwave and the Ravager either have alternate firing modes or they have alternate uses. I really like weapons like the Bulldog and the Pulse Carbine, which were surprisingly enjoyable to use and gave a nice twist to the weapons that they seem to be replacing. Though that said, I would still love to see the Carbine and the classic shotgun alongside these alternate versions. Like, I would love to have a traditional pump action shotgun as well as an automatic shotgun. I think there's honestly a place for both of them. Speaking of replacing classic weapons, I think the Sidekick and the Commando have the potential to be really great, but based on that previous aim assist issue I mentioned earlier, using these weapons can kind of be a coin flip. The sniper rifle seems to have a slightly slower fire rate, but is still satisfying to use. I really like the Needler and how they brought back the classic Combat Evolve melee animation. That just looks sick. The assault rifle is also pretty useful and fun to use. 343 has always been good with the assault rifle and making it actually feel like a useful weapon, but not too useful that you don't want to use anything but that. The battle rifle, plasma pistol, and Spanker rocket launcher are all about just as good as they've been throughout the series, though I'm happy to say the battle rifle feels a lot closer to 2 and 3 than it does 5. And finally, my favorite weapon, the Skewer. It is a pain to get kills with this weapon, but when you do, it is so satisfying. Please, 343, let us pin people to the wall with this thing. I didn't get a chance to test it out, but I really hope you can, because that would be the coolest thing ever. Along with these weapons, we also have power-ups and equipment. Now, power-ups like Overshield and Active Camo aren't that much different than they've been in past games, but I will say I love how good the Active Camo is, even though it doesn't last very long. But where the game truly starts to give me Halo 3 vibes is with the equipment. The grapple shot in particular is easily one of the best additions to a Halo game in a long time. I haven't been this impressed by a new addition to a Halo game since probably Assassinations, which are unfortunately not in the game right now. I know games with grappling hooks are really starting to become a trend, but this is one of those grappling hooks that is so fun to use because there are so many different ways to use it. You can swing yourself around using your momentum like your Spider-Man. You can pull weapons and pickups toward you. You can pull yourself towards enemies. And when you combo this baby with the gravity hammer, oh boy is it fun. You only get 3 grapple shots, but you can pick up more when the grapple shot respawns. And man, I cannot wait to see how people use this in custom games. I really hope we can have unlimited grapple shots for custom games, because the potential for this thing is truly, no pun intended, infinite. The other 2 equipment aren't as impactful, but they're also pretty interesting. You have the threat sensor that scans enemies wherever you shoot it, and on its own, I really wasn't too crazy about it. It's not the most effective, and I was about to write it off until I found out that you could shoot grenades, enemies, and friendlies with this, and suddenly this static scanner becomes mobile, and when you add that to the equation, it's a lot more interesting. As for the drop shield, it has potential to be great, but as is probably my least favorite of the 3. It's like the bubble shield, except you can break it and it's more of a wall that you can actually shoot through, but unfortunately it does take too much time to throw out, and it's pretty weak and breaks easily. Though, if you spawn two of them next to each other, you can kind of form the bubble shield from Halo 3, which is kind of funny. But overall, the gameplay as a whole feels great. It's really smooth, lag rarely occurred during matches, and besides for maybe a slight tweak to the time to kill, the pacing is perfect. This just feels like a superior experience to 343's previous attempts, and honestly, I'm proud of them. I've seen people really experiment with Infinite's Sandbox, and we've only been given a fraction of what this game has to offer. If they add enough, I can actually see myself playing this for 10 years. The last aspect of the gameplay I want to talk about is the maps. In this flight, we got Live Fire, Recharge, and Bazaar. Live Fire was probably my least favorite of the three, just because it was a lot more simply designed, borderline generic, and doesn't really take advantage of Infinite's verticality like the other two. However, it's still a neat map, and I love the setting as well as the fan service scattered around, like the Brute target dummies, the Noble Six's helmet, Sergeant Johnson name drop. There's even this cool pelican that flies by, but it does randomly jump into light speed, which I don't know if pelicans can do that. You might want to tweak that 343. Now, Recharge is probably the opposite of what I feel about Live Fire. Besides for the dam outside and the hammer pit, which honestly doesn't look that great, I'm not too crazy about this map's setting, though that's more just because I got tired of maps set in facilities or factories, because almost every single Halo 5 map was a factory or a facility. At least Halo Infinite is looking to have a lot more map variety, so I can overlook this. In fact, gameplay-wise, this map is great. There's a lot of ins and outs and multiple levels for you to get around, and it's just a playground with the grapple shot. The final map, Bazaar, is probably my favorite map of the three. It's both fun to play on and is aesthetically pleasing since it's based off the town market from Halo 2. Though, I swear to God, I'm gonna lose it if one more person says this or the game in general looks like Call of Duty. If you unironically think that,
you're not just wrong, you're stupid. Now wait just a minute. And you're ugly, just like your mum.
Just like Live Fire, there's a lot of references and fan service, from posters, graffiti, to even having the glorious Halo Infinite rat, and even Halo Infinite chickens. I also love that there's this hidden vent, because it reminds me of the hidden passage from my favorite Halo 3 map, High Ground.
Gained the lead. Double kill. Triple kill.
Now, one of the biggest features we tested with this flight was the bots. Regardless of how good they are, however, I do love their inclusion because they replace teammates who left a match early and leave you to face a whole enemy team on your own. This has been an annoying issue that has plagued every Halo game, and to be honest, even some of my friends are guilty of this. I'm not going to name any names, but they know who they are, and if any of them are watching...
Why?
That said though, the bots are pretty competent. Though, let's be clear, no bot is perfect and can perfectly replicate a human player, and they're gonna do stupid stuff, like getting caught in the geometry. If you use active camo or stand near a drop wall, they'll flat out ignore you, and they pretty much take the same path every single time during the beginning of every match, which is a good way to rack up kills. That said though, they can be pretty good, and while I never lost to bots in a match, they never made it easy for me either. I don't want to say they're MLG level good, but considering they're already teabagging and performing ninjas on people, they're pretty close. I mean, you can't say they're bad when they're doing stuff like this.
Another one down.
Yeah, and people wonder why we panic when people make machines smarter. They're already trolling us on video games now. But that said, I do really love how these bots function, and I'm very curious to see what would happen when we add vehicles and objectives to the equation. And if we can spawn these guys in Forge or custom games, ooh, that's gonna be incredible.
I just got ninja'd, I think. What? Yo, I assassinated him with camo, and he just assassinated me. I don't understand.
Another addition we tested during the flight was the Academy. This is where you can test Infinite's weapons and really show your skill. It's another feature that I might not see myself using much, but I'm happy it was included, especially for new players. Those who want to get the high scores and test their skills could have some fun trying the 3-star challenges, but I also like the 1-star challenges because since the bots stand still, it really gives you a chance to test Infinite's Sandbox. For example, which firing mode is better for the heat wave, horizontal or vertical? How much more damage does the headshot do than a body shot? Should I just shoot the Ravager or charge it up? Or will the Commando have less recoil if I don't spam the trigger as much? This is really a great mode to have for both newbies and pros. I will say it could use some work though. For one, I think it's a no-brainer this mode should come with a leaderboard. Also, I did notice a few weird things. The first of which was my scores usually got erased every time I reloaded the game, which got annoying and I think will be a real deal breaker for this mode if it's still around during launch. Also, I noticed the drill sergeant lady compliments my performance even if I get the lowest score, like 1 stars. And halfway through the flight, she just disappeared entirely. Like, I appreciate the compliments, but you're supposed to be a drill sergeant. Don't compliment me for sucking. Be mean. Spit in my face. Call me worthless like my parents. No. I'm just kidding. My parents love me, I think. The last sort of feature the flight showed was the customization. I already talked about some of the armors, so I'll try to be brief. Like I said prior, we once again have a reach level of customization, which includes helmets, chest pieces, shoulders, thighs, visors, gloves, and more. I love this stuff. It always drove me crazy how Halo 5 limited us to just helmet and body, and it feels so good to have this amount of customization again. We can even customize things like our personal AI or even how many prosthetics we want on each arm or leg, which is super cool. One aspect of the customization that isn't super cool and I'm still not a fan of, however, is the armor coatings. I made fun of these in a video once, and honestly, while some of them are kinda neat looking like this Mass Effect themed one, I'm still not won over by it. While everything else added variety to the customization, this seemed to limit it severely. What sucks about these coatings is, I'm just not a fan of some of these color combinations, and I feel like I would like the, a little bit better if I could at least change the color of one piece of armor. Why can't we just choose the color of each armor piece, like that Space Marine game a long way back? I think that did it perfectly. Honestly, it just feels like they kinda needed something to stretch out the battle pass, and that's why we have this. Also, I think the UI, while it is simple, I do feel like it's kinda clunky. Somebody by the name of Candy Rocks actually designed a better alternative, and I personally think this would look and feel better, so if you want 3 for 3, as long as you credit this person, have at it. Despite these two major issues though, I'm just happy that after 10 years, we finally have a Halo game to rival Reach's customization. It took longer than it should have, but I'm just happy we finally got to this point.
Why didn't somebody tell me my ass was so big?
I could talk in depth about a lot more stuff, but at this point, this video will most likely have passed the 30-minute mark by now, so I want to quickly wrap up by listing some bugs and glitches that I found and then just give my final thoughts. So here's a speedrun of all the issues I found that I haven't already mentioned during this video that 343 could fix before launch. First off, there's this blank black loading screen that also sometimes stays up during intros and outros. Speaking of intros and outros, sometimes the intros of your Spartans doing cool poses would be skipped altogether, whereas the outros of the Spartans standing at attention would have them be standing and facing random directions. Sometimes I would equip different armor pieces or coatings to my Spartan, and when I'd go to play the game, I'd still have the previous armor or coating equipped and it wouldn't change till a couple games later. The texture on one of the AIs broke. There's this weird color glitch for the Spartan in the friend menu. During a play session with friends, I or one of my fireteam members would fail to join our game and someone else would be put in our place and we'd have to wait for them to leave in order to join our friends during games, which was probably the most annoying at a lot of these. In some moments during gameplay, there were these weird rainbow colored screen tears throughout the bottom of my screen. And finally, my biggest issue with this flight wasn't even the flight itself, but instead how the flight was sent out. Many ended up playing the flight a day late because of Halo Waypoint site crashing, so we had to wait till it got back online to get our flight codes. So I hope with future flights, that one in particular is handled a lot better, but overall, these are all issues I didn't already mention throughout this video that I hope 343 will have time to polish before the game launches. Before I wrap up this video, I want to give a couple thank yous. First, if you watched this video from start to finish, thank you for your patience. Many of these were my opinions, and I'm sure some Halo fans out there will disagree with some of my points, but this is just my first impression of the game, okay? The second thank you I want to give is to 343 Industries themselves. I never expected this flight to be perfect by any means, but it came out pretty close and better than I could have ever anticipated, and now my excitement for the game has skyrocketed. I know me and the Halo community haven't always been on your side, but despite that, you never stopped trying, and because of your recent actions and willingness to hear the community's feedback, it has resulted in not only a Halo game that pleases both old and new fans, but also has the potential to be one of the best Halo games ever. And I know that's a huge claim with games like Halo 3, Reach, and 2 out there, but I actually believe 343 can do it. Just trying this game's foundation was a blast, so I feel like the sky is the limit for what they could build upon it. So, thank you 343 for letting us play this flight and giving you feedback, and I hope we'll get another chance to try Halo Infinite again real soon. Take care, everyone.